When we started the modern electric car revolution just over a decade ago, there were really only two types of electric vehicle on sale. High-performance, oh so expensive sports cars like the original Tesla Roadster, and family hatchbacks with limited range. It was a time before you could have a car that could carry a lot and travel a long way.
But mercifully since then, the EV market has diversified a lot. There's not just one choice of vehicle for one type of buyer. There's a whole range of different cars, ranging from affordable commuters through to electric pickup trucks, crossovers, and high-end luxury sedans. And here on this channel, we get to drive them all. And while I'll admit, I wish we had more affordable vehicles more often to drive, we do our best to evaluate each vehicle that we encounter for its own strengths and weaknesses, as well as examine where it sits in its relative market.
So far this year, we've got to test the Polestar 2, the Kia EV6, the Mercedes-Benz EQS 4MATIC 580, and most recently the BMW i4 eDrive 40. And each of these cars cross-shop in some way or another against other vehicles in the EV marketplace. But today's car, the Porsche Taycan 4 Cross Turismo, doesn't cross-shop against anything else we can think of in the marketplace. That's because the Porsche Taycan 4 Cross Turismo is the beefier, more rugged sibling to the Porsche Taycan, a car that we first got to drive back in 2019. It replaces the Taycan's sloping rear hatch with a wagon-style rear, adding some welcome load-carrying capabilities. It gets unique wheels and trim, and most importantly, it gets a new mode, aka gravel mode, a mode that Porsche is very, very proud of. So when we get told by one of Porsche's team we have to try out said gravel mode, well, it'd be rude not to. And we Brits, we're all about manners.
So today we're going to get to show you around the Porsche Taycan 4 Cross Turismo for the very first time. And we're going to put it through its paces on the road. Oh, and we intend to get it dirty. Very dirty.
This is the long version of this video for those who like to savour their German metal like fine wine. But if you'd rather do a quick data transfer, there's a link in the video description below.
And regardless of which version you choose, there are tiny little chapter marks for you to skip to the relevant section.
Proportionally, the car looks incredible with all the right curves in all the right places. The roofline follows the Taycan's curves almost until the B-pillar, then eases off significantly, giving additional headroom to both front and rear passengers. 0.35 inches or just under 9 millimeters at the front, and 3.62 inches, 92 millimeters for the rear. The roofline continues onto this sport wagon rear, and instead of the usual C and D pillars you'll find in a wagon or estate, there's this hunk of metal that is basically a C and D pillar combined. That does impact side visibility a little, but again we'll come to more of that in the drive. The door handles are unusual. They self-present to help you gain access to the car, but they also lie flat when you're driving to help with aerodynamic flow. And just like the Taycan, there's a bunch of tweaks to the outside of this car to direct air around the car and in some cases through parts of the car in order to achieve maximum aerodynamic efficiency. This particular variant of the Cross Turismo comes with Porsche's Performance Battery Plus with 93.4 kilowatt hours of battery capacity, 83.7 kilowatt hours of which is usable. On paper, this gives an EPA range of 215 miles, 346 kilometers, and no, in case you're curious, there's no larger option currently available, which means this definitely isn't the longest-legged EV you can buy. That's okay though, because this car has an 800-volt battery pack and charging system capable of charging at up to 270 kilowatts from a compatible CCS charging station, as well as not one, but two charging inlets up front. On the driver's side, in left-hand drive markets, you just get a regular J1772 outlet that's capable of charging at up to 9.6 kilowatts for 10.5 hours full charge time at home, while the other side of the car houses a CCS combo inlet that can operate at up to 800 volts and charge the car from 5 to 80% in 22.5 minutes. Obviously in Europe, you'll get a Type 2 connector. Sadly, you can't use both charging inlets at the same time, but it does make charging the Taycan a lot easier at low-speed charging stations. I just wish it had CCS on both sides for ultimate flexibility. At some charging stations, it can be really tricky to get the car into a position where the cables can reach. Getting all the power to the road are these 20-inch wheels fitted with 245s at the front and 285s at the rear. There are 6-piston brakes at the front, pinching internally vented cast iron discs, while you'll see 4-piston brakes at the rear, as well as a little regenerative braking added to the mix.
If you were to catch a glance of the Cross Turismo from just the front, you might have a tough time telling it apart from the regular Porsche Taycan, unless you really know what it is you're looking for. That's because the front end of this car is very similar to the Taycan. Both cars have that same sweeping front wing that screams 911, and the quad flat LED matrix headlights. They all show that this car is meant for more than just getting to and from work. That said, as I'll come to a little later on in my walk around, this car normally sits higher than the Taycan to enable it to better tackle unpaved roads. And despite this being the entry-level Taycan Cross Turismo, if indeed an US MSRP of $97,700 can be considered entry-level, this particular variant looks no less capable than the range-topping Turbo S Cross Turismo. All cars get the same sporty wheel arches with fender extensions, the same sweeping windscreen, and the same active air intake system that can close off in ideal conditions to give the car a drag coefficient of just 0.26. Unlike some cars on the market, you can actually pop the front trunk from the remote, and underneath here you'll find 2.9 cubic feet of storage space. That's 84 litres for those who prefer SI units. That's enough for an overnight bag, charge cables, or anything else you'd like to just throw up here and forget. It's pretty deep too, and this week I actually used the area to store extra shopping bags when doing my trip. You also have this really nice organisation system for the emergency equipment, the warning triangle, the tyre pump, and everything you need to make sure that if you do get a flat, you're not left stranded. Underneath the frunk, there's the usual power electronics you'll find in any EV, plus a heat pump for cooling and heating, and of course, the front motor. Unlike the regular Taycan, which is available as either a rear-wheel or all-wheel drive vehicle, depending on the model you choose, all Taycan Cross Turismo variants are dual-motor drivetrains, with a single-speed fixed-ratio transmission on the front axle and a two-speed transmission on the rear. Despite being the entry-level model, I should note that this still does a 4.8-second sprint to 60 miles per hour, or 5.1 seconds to 100 kilometers per hour. On paper, this car offers 280 kilowatts combined from both motors, 375 imperial horses, or 350 kilowatts, 469 horsepower, when overboost power in launch control mode is engaged. Maximum torque in that configuration, 368 foot-pounds, or 500 newton meters. At the rear of the Taycan 4 Cross Turismo, we have this currently very dirty hatch, complete with a good old-fashioned rear wiper. There isn't one on the Taycan sedan, but the Taycan Cross Turismo gets one, and boy are we glad about that fact, especially when we've been driving it off-road this week. The centre of the hatch has the car's name and the variant, and honestly, if you were stuck behind this car on the motorway, you might not have noticed it was even an electric car. There's no EV badging, no gimmicks, and no accented tailpipe deletes. And I like that. Gaining access to the rear is pretty simple. There's a button right in the centre of the hatch, and when inside, you're presented with 14.3 cubic feet, or 404 litres of load space. Again, as with some of the other cars we've reviewed recently, that's using the German SAE method of luggage measurement, which doesn't allow you to fill past the window line. However, if you fold down the rear seats, you'll end up with 41.4 cubic feet to the windows. That's 1,172 litres. There's also this subfloor area, which, while small, is ideal to stand up grocery bags in, as I discovered last weekend. The cover is actually attached to the car, which some people might like and others won't. There's also a handy dandy 12-volt accessory outlet back here, which we used earlier to pump up a wayward tyre. It's really easy to get stuff in and out of the boot because of the lower lip on the bumper, but if you want a little extra help, this car has your back, because just like the Taycan sedan, the Taycan Cross Turismo has active air suspension. This means it's possible to lower the suspension a little to give you easier access to the rear. But it's worth noting that the Taycan Cross Turismo sits higher than the Taycan sedan in most situations, up to 20 millimeters, 0.78 inches of extra ground clearance compared to the sedan. And if you opt for the off-road design package, which this car has, then you'll get an extra 10 millimeters, 0.39 inches of ground clearance. But enough of looking around the outside. Let's check the inside out and take it on the road. This is not an affordable car.
Oh God, no.
But it's a great benchmark for other automakers to aspire to.
It certainly is. It's something that gives other automakers a challenge. It's a gauntlet thrown down to say, this is how good you can be.
You know, Porsche is a car company that likes to think of itself as a bespoke car company. It's not like, you know, your traditional Detroit automaker where you can have this package and you can have this package, but you can't have them together because that is verboten. Porsche basically goes, okay, what do you want? What colour trim do you want? What colour seats do you want? What colour exterior do you want? And I think there's something just mind-blowing, like 200 plus different combinations that you can spec. The Porsche Taycan and the Taycan Cross Turismo come under a lot of criticism in a world where 300 miles is quickly becoming kind of the target, especially for high-end car companies, to reach when it comes to range per charge. And this vehicle has, 80 something kilowatt hours of usable battery capacity, and it only does 215 miles per charge. But golly gosh,
those 215 miles are an enormous amount of fun. I have had the most fun I have had in a long time driving this car. I think it's very good that I don't own one, because I don't think my driving license would tolerate it for a very long period of time. Just even driving down here, even driving on the freeway down here through traffic, it was just enormous fun, the feel through that steering wheel.
There is no doubt that this car has been set up as a driver's vehicle to tell you categorically, this is where the wheels are, this is what they are doing. Pretty much every car we've driven this year has been quite insistent about its intervention. You know, the BMW i4 that we've just reviewed, it was quite insistent about where it wanted you to be in the road and would nudge the steering wheel quite forcefully if it felt that you were not in the right place. This car alerts me, it vibrates the steering wheel if it thinks I'm out of position or I've gone over the lane markings, but it doesn't kind of drag me back in a visceral way like the BMW did. And it's not like the Tesla autopilot system, which is, refuses to cede control to the driver until it's absolutely obvious the driver absolutely needs to take control of the vehicle.
And let's be clear, this is not a car that is designed to do things for you.
No.
This is not a car that you buy if you want it to drive you places. This is a car that you buy if you want to drive places and experience the journey.
The air suspension is very good. It's an adaptive air suspension system. There's a button right here on the dash that I can press when I'm at low speed. If I want to go into a parking lot or I suddenly come across, speed humps in a residential area, and it will raise the suspension automatically for me. The car will then ask me if I want to remember where the suspension was raised so that the next time I go there, it automatically raises.
And one of the other things that I think we should comment on is that this thing also stops. It stops really well.
It really does. I mean, we're following the camera car right now. I'm just going to check behind me to make sure it's safe. And we're almost stopped. So there is a button on the steering wheel, right? Just here. And it allows you to have a little bit of regenerative braking on accelerator liftoff. It allows you to switch between coasting, which I'm coasting now, and then you engage the button and it then switches to regenerative braking on accelerator liftoff. But it's comparable to lifting off on a reasonably low compression engine in a high gear if you're driving a manual.
Yeah, it's very gentle. And then there's a third mode, so if you press and hold it, it will take you into an intelligent regenerative braking, which seems to be taking account of what the traffic is doing up ahead of you. And it does work very well on the freeway. It adds a little more regen, it helps to keep you more well positioned behind the vehicles in front of you. And I used that a lot when I was driving down today, and it worked very well.
A lot of people say that this car doesn't have regenerative braking. It does, it's just all assigned to the brake pedal, apart from what we just talked about. That regenerative braking is very good. As long as you don't absolutely stomp on the brake pedal, you're going to be using regenerative braking to slow the car down. It's only if you really need to stop in a hurry, and this car really does stop in a hurry, then you're going to be using regenerative braking. Which brings me to the actual motors and the drivetrain. Obviously, the Cross Turismo, all Cross Turismos have dual motor, which is different to the Taycan. The Taycan you can get as a rear-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive. All of the Cross Turismos are all-wheel drive. And the front motor is a single ratio fixed gear, as most EV motors are. But the rear does something special, right?
That rear motor has 2 gears, which is all automatically controlled. This isn't something where you're going to be paddle shifting between 2 gears. But what Porsche say is that allows the vehicle to be a much better long-legged cruiser while maintaining that really good 0 to 60 time.
Right. So if you absolutely nail it from a standstill, it's going to be using the gear that gives it the best torque, that allows you to accelerate really, really quickly. And then as soon as you get up to cruising speed, you actually feel it. It does kick in. I've actually accelerated this car hard, and about 60, 70 miles an hour from a standstill, you do feel it just pause ever so slightly as it comes up and gives you an absolute kick into that next gear. But it's all very seamless.
It is very seamless, and Porsche said that that is actually a deliberate engineering decision to have that little bit of a feel so you know what it's doing.
We've switched over, obviously.
Yes, because it's my turn to drive.
The variant of the dash we're displaying right now has 3 separate pod areas that you can change. You can change the information about the speed, the power level. You can have the right one customized to display whatever you want, the left one customized to display whatever you want. Right now it looks like you've got the speed recognition signs on.
Yes, you can. One of the things that's nice about this is it does have the option to show you turn-by-turn directions, but I will say that in town, the navigation was a little bit less accurate than maybe would be ideal. Like, I came off the freeway and it still thought I was on the freeway, and so didn't then give me the directions to come off. And I had a couple of points where the turn-by-turn was not showing me the right junction for where I was, which was unfortunate. But what it does have is that nice countdown display as you approach the junctions, which is really handy. And yesterday, when I was doing the charging test, so I was trying to run the car down as well as get a good experience of driving it, it did readjust the route planning when it started to get to the point where it didn't think I could make it to the charger. It actually got quite insistent and, in fact, stopped having my charger listed as an available destination and kept saying, make a U-turn. And eventually I just went, well, this is where we're going and the battery's the right temperature, so this is where we're going. I did kind of eke that one in. It was just 2% when I got to the charger. So I think we should talk a little bit about that charging experience, because this is meant to be one of the fastest charging cars available at the moment.
And your experience says no?
Well, it was fast. I will say it was a very rapid. I tried it twice because the first experience wasn't quite what I'd hoped for. I took the car down to 2%. It was preconditioned. I plugged into a 350 kilowatt charger, and the car peaked at around 200 kilowatts, just under, and it stayed there for a while before tailing off. Today, when I was driving down, I did the same, but I only took it down to about 50%, and then it was charging from 50% at about 100 kilowatts, which isn't quite what I was expecting.
Now, I know that in California, when I experienced the rapid charging of the Taycan, it was very quick. And it may be that, you know, the weather here, the temperatures here have a part to play. Maybe the battery didn't get as warm as it needed to have that high level of charge. But you're not the first person to say that the Taycan charging rates are not always what they claim to be. However, I would say that's true of pretty much every EV we've tested. So there is one other thing that I think that we should talk about when it comes to charging. We haven't mentioned it previously. Yes, this car has an 800 volt battery pack, and if you can find an 800 volt to 300 kilowatt charger, you can charge pretty quickly compared to other EVs. But if you happen across a 400 volt charging station, do you know what happens?
I do not.
The car will only charge at 50 kilowatts. That's because the charging circuitry for the 400 volt and the 800 volt are actually separate. And Porsche decided to not include that higher capacity 400 volt charging. So it will charge at 400 volts, but it will only charge up to 50 kilowatts. If you want it to be blisteringly fast, you have to find a blisteringly fast charging station. And that's something I don't believe the eGMP platform from Hyundai Kia has an issue with. As far as I'm aware, if you have a Kia EV6 or a Hyundai Ioniq 5, if you turn up and you plug in and it's a 400 volt charging station, you can still charge as briskly as it's possible to do without having any other, concerns or issues. It doesn't restrict you to 50 kilowatts.
But it does point to a challenge if you are planning to take this vehicle over long distances, particularly in areas which don't have really great charging infrastructure, because those 350 kilowatt chargers are definitely not as common out in the sticks.
The charge door positions are actually quite helpful for home charging, but they're not really far forward enough for some of the older Electrify America charging stations or some other DC quick charging stations. And of course in Europe, where Tesla is now unlocking its supercharger network to non-Tesla EVs, I can imagine that causing problems.
I think it's going to cause challenges for anyone driving this long distance, and not necessarily challenges for the Porsche driver, but more so challenges for those trying to use the other charging stations. When I charged this today, I had to park in the wrong space to get the cable to reach, and that meant a couple of abortive attempts at parking where I found that the cable couldn't quite reach and I still was in the right space. And then I went, well, stuff it, there's no one else here and I'm only going to be here 10, maybe 15 minutes, so I just parked in the wrong space. But that then made one of the other chargers inaccessible.
The visibility out of this car is phenomenal. The interior of the Taycan for Cross Turismo reminds me that we are in a driver-centric car. There's no fancy, massive touchscreen display. Yes, there are a couple of touchscreen displays. There's one in between you and I, there's one in front of me, and if you have a higher end car, you can have an optional one in front of the passenger. But the screens are not all consuming. The thing that really you get a good view of is the road ahead. And I think this has one of the best visibility, frontward visibility of any modern EV.
For a car, because obviously if you have an SUV, you can sometimes have a larger glass area, and that can make the view a little bit more expansive, although not necessarily a better view of the road, because in this, the A-pillars are relatively slender, the B-pillars are relatively slender, and then that CD pillar, you don't get such great visibility out of that rear quarter, but frankly that is covered by the blind spot detection, and you can see well enough out of that back window.
We talked a lot about the actual driving experience, the powertrain, the gears and everything else. We haven't really talked about the interior all that much, and for my money this feels a little, not cheap, but a little harder wearing than I'd expected from a Porsche, especially one that's nearly 100 grand. But I guess if you don't have the optional bicycle rack that comes out of the rear bumper on this car, which we haven't talked about before in the video, but you can spec it with an optional package that allows you to pull the bumper out and it turns it into a bicycle rack that you can put 2 bicycles on. It's designed to store 2 electric bicycles, but apparently Porsche says they are sold out of that.
Yes, they said they'd sold out for quite some time.
So much so they couldn't get them for the press fleet.
Yeah, and been so astonished by how popular it is, which suggests people really are using this car kind of in the way that it's intended.
So if you're going to put your triathlete bike in the back of this, you're going to be folding the seats down. You're going to just put your bike in, your running shoes, your bike shoes, and your swimming gear. And I can understand in that context why this would be more hard wearing than luxury. But I've noticed when we picked the car up, we had less than, I think, 3,500 miles on it. It's now got 5 and change. There are marks on the interior. Now this is a press car, but there is a blemish, a nasty blemish on the left-hand side of the steering wheel. And it just feels, I mean, it's not super hard plastic, but it's not the softest plastic I've ever experienced. I think the higher trim levels have better trim, so maybe that's where Porsche decided to make the savings, and I can't fault Porsche for that. Make a car that drives amazing regardless of what trim package and just make the interior more opulent. I'm down with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I would say that nothing feels cheap. I mean, it all feels very well put together. There's no little loose flappy bits or anything like that. It all feels good, just not luxury.
The thing I don't like is that the air vents are not directionable.
No.
They don't move. You cannot move them manually.
No.
And I think the car takes care of directing the air where it thinks it needs to go. And you've obviously got ventilated seats, and you've got heated seats, you've got a heated steering wheel, and you've got dual zone climate control. All perfect, all amazing. It does have a heat pump.
It does.
Which is a good thing, because so many car companies are still not putting heat pumps in.
Well, and with the 200 and some mile range, you really want an efficient heating system, because otherwise in winter that's going to be pretty disastrous.
120 miles, yeah.
Yeah. With a heat pump, you're going to get like 80% of your range.
In terms of rear seat space, I think you would be comfortable on short trips. There's enough headroom to be comfortable, more than there is in the Taycan, because you've got that modified roofline. But there is this transmission tunnel that doesn't need to be here, in the middle of the car. And it's got like a coin tray or phone tray in the middle. Now, there is a middle seat belt, but I really would call this a 4-seater rather than a 5-seater. It's a 5-seater for short distances, not for long distances. This roof is obviously a single-piece panoramic. Some models, I think in some markets, don't have the glass roof and some do. And if you spec it right and you have a higher end model, you have a photochromic roof, which allows you to darken portions of the roof depending on what you need at any given time. This is just a standard tinted, heavily tinted roof. I haven't felt, huge amounts of solar radiation enter into the car from this. In terms of the seats, I feel like the material this seat is made of seems to be pretty hard wearing, plenty of adjustment. I also have the ability to lengthen my seat cushion, my bolster, which I really like.
And I have found that the headrest is comfortable, which seems like such a small thing. And I know I got quite a lot of flack for commenting on my discomfort in the Mercedes EQS. But if you aren't able to get the seat into a comfortable position, that is really a problem.
I feel that this is a car that that is better suited to making long distance trips, but it's one where it gets you engaged and gets you enjoying every 200 miles. You get out, you spend 15 minutes, you go to the loo, grab a coffee, whatever, and you're back in the saddle and ready for the next 200 miles. And that feels like a really good, balanced point. That, you know, sometimes I think cars focus on range to the point that you really should be stopping more frequently, but you don't because you've still got range. And I feel that this seems to be in a sweet spot.
So, I've taken you to one of the finer gravel roads in these parts. Some nice tight twisties near the top. Let's put it into gravel mode.
Alright then.
Now I must admit, I've already come up this road once in this car, which I think was responsible for the original amount of dust on the back.
Yeah, I did notice that.
But the ride is surprisingly good. And we're doing like 40 miles an hour on a gravel road. I should point out that we've had heavy rain lately, so I don't feel too bad about kicking up some dust. But obviously, normally one would want to be quite careful about such things.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite deep gravel here, but the car really does respond very well. Again, it lets you know very clearly what's going on, where the slip is and where it needs you to kind of slow down and give it a little bit more time to get round. When the car arrived, it had two massive stone chips in the front bumper, which Porsche was very kindly able to fix for us. And you know, it happens with press cars, right? They are constantly put through a huge amount of stress, and when Porsche tells you to drive it on a road like this, you do.
Yeah, I mean, if Porsche tells you to take his press car out and try it on a gravel road.
Now the noise you just heard back there was a practice here just to kind of make the road a little uneven to improve traction, and it's a stability control to make sure that this road is not like super soft and loose. But this car just asks for more and more and more, and the cloud of smoke, or rather the cloud of dust that's coming up behind us is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I kind of want them to give me a rally track so that I can do this without fear of someone coming the other way. Because I'm being a bit gentle because I can't see that far up ahead.
And you don't know this road as well as I do.
Not.
Here's the really sharp right. It just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. The car, I don't know if you were pushing through that, but it did give you a great amount of feedback. I could feel it in the passenger seat, how much feedback this car actually gives you and tells you what's going on.
Oh, I want to play with this car so bad.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I'd love to see this come through like a rally stage here. So you've got a left and then a sharp right. And very often this is a blind corner here. And then another sharp left. We're nearly at the top. And then we'll be back to a tarmacked road, which is unfortunate because
I'm quite happy on this.
more. I've actually taken an electric scooter on this, and it's just hilariously good fun. In fact, this is where I purposely crashed an electric scooter we've got on review because I wanted to see how it would handle being dropped. It handled it really fine. So there you go, back onto the main road. Was that fun?
No, I think you're mistaken. We're turning round.
So, Kate, 2021 Porsche Taycan 4 Cross Turismo. What do you think?
Just look at it for a second. Just
it's a beautiful car.
It is.
Winter was right.
Winter was right. It is so well engineered. It is comfortable and it is quick.
And it's not making the usual sports car compromises that you normally have to have in an internal combustion engine car to make it perform the way it performs.
No, you can use this car every day if you want to, and you have the money to make that kind of thing happen. This car can be your commuter. It can be your sort of family car. It's a little bit of a kind of statement, but
it's got great advanced safety technology features. The adaptive cruise control's good. The lane keep assist is pretty good. You have to keep your hands on the steering wheel, but it's good. It's a good all-round package. I think of all the electric cars I've driven, this is still the benchmark for any other high-end expensive electric vehicle.
Yeah, and I think it also shows what you can do, because a lot of the vehicles out there, they're compromised in terms of the way their road feels, or they're compromised in the way that the sound is, or all those kinds of things. There's lots of little things that people can pick on, and we pick on.
Yeah.
And then this says, no, you don't have to do that. It can just be this good.
And the way it lets you know where the limits are very reassuring as well. It doesn't, I think I said earlier on in the drive, it makes you feel a better driver than you are. But when you reach a point that the car is genuinely reaching the edge of its physical limits, it taps you on the shoulder gently and goes, yeah, it's time to slow down now.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like the fact that the dashboard is fully customizable. You can just have the speedometer. You can have a map. It's easy to change the configuration. And while some things are hidden several menus down, it's generally easy to change the things you need, like the suspension, like the driving mode. It's easy to use the "Hey Porsche" command, and the natural voice language system is very good. The car has never said, "I don't understand you" or anything like that. Sometimes it's triggered by accident, but generally it actually answers my question, which is better than the BMW system from a couple of weeks back.
I have to say also the navigation system, its route planning was pretty flawless. It added chargers where it needed to, and that is something that we really haven't seen working very well in a lot of other cars.
And it's got a front trunk, and it's got load space in the rear, and it's not taken up by an amplifier. This is genuinely a car that you could put a weekend's worth of luggage in and go road trip.
With the off-road gravel track mode, we can go anywhere pretty much that we want to.
And you got it very dirty.
It is very dirty.
Well, hopefully Porsche doesn't mind.
It'll all buff out. It's fine.
Thanks to Porsche for letting us borrow this car and letting us get it kind of dirty. And thank you at home for watching.
That's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to leave your thoughts below. Or in our free to join Discord chat room, there's a link in the video description. And if you want to tell us how awesome we are without leaving YouTube, why not try a super thanks? It's easy to pass on the love and it all goes to helping the channel grow. Don't forget that we produce videos every single day on this network for you to enjoy, ranging from deep dives and features to tutorials, unboxings and reviews. And if you want the most comprehensive roundup of all the news in the EV world on a weekly basis, check out our 10 news show every Saturday. If you haven't already, make sure you've subscribed to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, and give the bell a gentle ring to make sure you're told when our next video goes live.
Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go out to the folks on our right for being our $15 to $49 a month supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month supporters, Chris Maxwell, Pedro Mora Pinheiro, Patrick Boyarsky, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leon, Andrew Martin, Quida Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tesla in the Gong, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Carl Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Bellows, Rory Litwin, Jim Burness, Chris Asentar, Chris and Michael Johnson, Peter Dillinger and Denny Hyde, and our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month patron supporters. They are Anonymous Freak, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, Reed R, JP Fagerback, Russ, Will Graylin, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Laura Reynolds, Ellery Hensley, and Ian. If you are feeling left out, you can join Patreon at the link below, hit the join button to support us on YouTube, or show us your support through buying some cool swag or by making a tip through Ko-fi. Links below. Thanks for joining us, and as always, keep evolving.